is 11 o'clock. Welcome to everybody who is still coming in and who's already joined us. Carlie, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you can go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Carlie Utesch. I'm presenting on behalf of AQUALIS today. We'll talk about mitigating property and parking lot flooding. So a little bit about me. I'm a certified stormwater control measure maintenance and inspection professional, not an engineer. But as a marketing lead here at AQUALIS, I create educational content that turns complex stormwater requirements into practical guidance for property and facility teams. So I do want to have a little disclaimer. I'm not a technical expert, but I'm here to educate people, especially that are not familiar within the stormwater industry. So that is the strong purpose for today, is really that introductory educational piece. If you're familiar with the industry, if you're familiar with stormwater as a whole, please stay. I'd love to have a discussion about how we're educating people. And I think this can be a really great opportunity to talk about that. So if you're not familiar with AQUALIS, we are the industry leader in sustainable water compliance and management services. And for over 20 years, we have delivered stormwater, wastewater, and water quality testing to clients nationwide. So I have a few learning objectives for us today. We will review some responsibilities implemented by the Clean Water Act and recognize regulations across the nation on the local, regional, and national levels. We will understand the different stormwater components that assist in managing stormwater runoff. We will assess some case studies where poorly maintained stormwater systems ended up impacting some businesses. And finally, we will evaluate preventative measures that can be taken to ensure proper function of stormwater assets that reduce flooding and then property damage as well. So to get started, in our first section, we'll talk about the foundation for the presentation, which is why stormwater management is so important. All right, in this illustration, we have your average retail commercial parking lot. If you follow the yellow lines, that would be the natural flow of water. So as it rains, runoff drains across the lot into, thankfully, a storm grate. You know, we have a stormwater system on this property. And the catch basin is ultimately connected to a retention pond that then pushes out water to, let's say this is a bay or a lake we have here. So the pesticides, sediment, oils, trash, all flow with the water. You know, they're going into the catch basin and then the pond, and the pond is meant to capture those. So the pond slowly deposits the stormwater into our lake here, which is why we need the pond to mitigate those pollutants and all the extra runoff within it. So without the stormwater system, rain carries pollution into the lake directly. The water is moved across the impervious surfaces that we have within our urban development. So maintaining and managing stormwater runoff is an extreme concern because of the concentrated amount of impervious surfaces in all of our developed infrastructure. So with more impervious surfaces, which are just surfaces that don't allow water to penetrate, that means larger amounts of runoff need to be either redirected and then also treated. So all that runoff or rainwater or stormwater is funneled through stormwater control measures, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. Those ultimately manage water quality and water quantity. So without these stormwater systems, all of these pollutants, the trash, pesticides, sediment, they're all swept up into stormwater runoff, which is ultimately directed into our local lakes, rivers, oceans, and bays, any body of water where our communities and ecosystems drink, and then, you know, use the water for recreational purposes as well. So that's the real driver here. We want to make sure that this water is properly maintained and clean enough for us to use it for recreational purposes and then also drink. So if the stormwater systems are not maintained properly, animals and communities can get sick. So we implement these systems to protect our wetlands, aquatic ecosystems, improve the quality of receiving water bodies, protect public health, and also offer flood control. So for our purposes today, I'm going to use these terms interchangeably. We have a best management practice or BMP, and then a stormwater control measure or SCM. So these are treatment measures, techniques, or structural controls to assist in managing stormwater. So they manage the quantity and the quality of that runoff. Some are intended to do, quantity more than quality or vice versa. But ultimately, we often use these in tandem, multiple stormwater control measures on one site to manage that runoff. I'll refer to it as a treatment train in a couple slides as well. So we will also dive into what those assets are. Okay, so we have, bioretention or rain gardens, sand filters, constructed wetlands, wet or dry detention basins, retention detention ponds, grass swales. All of these systems work together in a system, ultimately a treatment train. So they follow through one to another all the way through to treat and maintain and manage stormwater runoff. So let's talk about the regulations in place. Okay, so at the federal level, we have the EPA and the Clean Water Act. So these regulations are, overreaching on the federal level. And then beneath that, we have the state and local regulations. So the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or a NPDES permit. I had a colleague call it a NPDES permit, and I thought that was really fun. So you may be familiar with that. And then also an MS4 permit, or the municipal separate sewer system permit. These regulations work together to implement local stormwater programs and then ultimately compel local property owners and facility managers to maintain properly functioning stormwater systems. So state and local regulations vary widely across the country, but these variations in local compliance are important and relevant to the area that they are implemented in. Because they vary so greatly across the country. A lot of multi-site property owners have some difficulty in managing stormwater, but it's important to do so anyway. So now that we've talked about the regulations, let's talk about how stormwater control measures can help property owners comply with these regulations. Okay, so stormwater control measures are designed to control water quality as well as water quantity of post-construction stormwater runoff. That is primarily what I'll be talking about today, not necessarily during active construction. But there are regulations the stormwater control measures are implemented to comply with regulations. So they manage a threshold of pollutants related to the quality of the water, but then also mitigate the amount of water or the quantity. So different stormwater control measures achieve different goals depending on what is needed for the site. In some areas, oils or grease may be more likely, meaning that this site needs a specific filtering stormwater control measure, or in an area with a large parking lot, a pond may be necessary to capture the runoff and reduce that flooding. So moving on, let's talk about how. Going into more details about the importance of water quality, in many areas across the country, stormwater flows directly into lakes and streams without treatment, meaning anything it collects along the way could end up in our waters. Here are some common pollutants. Many of these harm our natural ecosystem either by blocking sunlight, impacting dissolved oxygen levels, introducing toxins, or changing the pH. These pollutants can be found everywhere in our daily lives, from trash on the side of the road, pesticides or fertilizers, unstabilized dirt, leaking gas tanks, animal waste, and sewage or paints and detergents. Untreated runoff will collect all of these. So stormwater control measures are put in place to stop pollutants before they reach streams. We actually had an instance where a detention pond was very white, which is of course not normal. And so upon some further investigation, there was actually painting occurring across the street. And then of course it rained and the paint was pushed into the pond. So while that's definitely alarming and something to keep an eye on, that's the point of the pond, right? Is to collect that paint before it goes somewhere else. So it's definitely something to be very aware of. Oops, sorry, I forgot this last bullet point, the toxic chemicals. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about water quantity. Today, of course, this is our main focus. So when we think of water quantity, we think of flooding, but there's more than just flooding. The impacts really do span much greater than that. So flood prevention is our main objective for today. Stormwater assets help to mitigate flooding in parking lots, private and public property, including roadways. This flooding impacts the quality of water, as well as we just mentioned that last slide, the quantity. So when systems flood, they don't function as designed, increasing the risk of contaminated water as a system isn't flowing or filtering or treating the water properly. Also, waterway health. Flooding impacts waterway health with the destabilization of stream channels that ultimately damages aquatic habitats. Groundwater reduction. Large amounts of runoff prevent groundwater recharge, which is the natural infiltration of water into the soil. The recharge assists by slowly moving water into the water table, which naturally removes pollutants. That's important as well. Erosion, soil destabilization, which can lead to major public safety and also impact stream banks. Sewer overflows. This is a common occurrence during flooding when backup pumps or systems fail to handle the amount of water, which will lead to untreated wastewater reaching local rivers and lakes that can make people and organisms sick. So all of these impacts can be mitigated with proper stormwater management. All right, we've established the why when it comes to managing stormwater, but what are the responsibilities of property owners or those that assist owners with managing properties? So there are two major facets about property owner responsibilities we'll talk about today. Inspections on one side, and then the other is the operation and maintenance agreements, operation and maintenance plans. So inspections, this can include a notice of termination or pre-occupancy inspection. That's really on the pre-construction side. So they take place during construction of a property before the operation of the site, before the ownership is transferred. So any maintenance or repair needs are documented for the general contractor to perform before the property owner becomes responsible. Moving on, annual inspections ensure that a stormwater system continues to function as designed and is in compliance with federal, state, and local regulations. So every facet of the system is inspected and examined, and then an action plan can be developed for any system that has been improperly maintained or requires some restorative repairs. So an annual inspection, the report is typically submitted to your local municipality. It may require certification by a stormwater professional or a professional engineer. And then operation and maintenance agreements, also called O&M agreements. They're typically established during the construction site during the construction phase, and they're often on file with your local municipality. So this document includes a maintenance schedule, inspection requirements, frequency of inspections, and description of maintenance activities. So mowing, treating vegetation, debris and sediment removal, inlet or outlet cleaning. In an ideal world, these are very comprehensive. That's not always the case, but when they are well documented, it is a property owner's greatest tool. It removes any mystery around the understanding of the site and how to properly manage it. But depending on the age of your system, this may be found on file with your municipality. And if not, AQUALIS is here to assist in implementing the document as well as creating one in the first place. But establishing that maintenance plan that works best for the site, keeping in mind the budget and the system needs. So if your property is not maintained or inspected, you can be at risk of being issued a notice of violation. So what is a notice of violation? It's an official notification to inform a non-compliant property owner or manager of a violation in relation to improper stormwater management. So when regulations or the operation and maintenance agreements are not followed, the notice of violation is called different things in different places. Sometimes corrective action, corrective notice, but it's issued to the property owner. So this document includes where the issue was found and also ideally how to fix it. So I have a sample example here. It often includes, an outline of expectations of the repairs that need to happen, and then often a timeline as well of you have, 30 or 90 days to do this, and if you don't, you may have some penalties or fines. I do also want to note, ignorance is unfortunately never an excuse when it comes to environmental regulations. It's absolutely necessary to take action. But more than just the fine behind this violation, the importance is protecting the watershed, right? So regulatory bodies don't ever issue fines just to issue fines. There's always a reason. There's always some environmental expectations that are the root behind the violation. So it's really important to communicate if you're issued one of these with the municipality, and most often they're very agreeable people. I know a lot of you are on the call today, and AQUALIS is here to work with the municipalities as well as property owners to really facilitating that relationship and making sure that our environment is protected in the end. So those regulations are really in place to ensure your system is working correctly, meaning it's capturing pollutants and reducing excess runoff. So keeping your property inspected and maintained is so that it's properly functioning is the best way to maintain compliance. We recommend doing those inspections on an annual basis. It may even be more frequently depending on where you live and the amount of rain you get. But now that we understand the background of stormwater violations, let's talk about why you may be issued one. So there's two different types, the during construction and after construction. Quickly going over during construction, there's a couple different factors and instances that may warrant a violation. The standards for construction practices are very different because there's a high risk of pollution with, unstabilized dirt and other potential vulnerabilities. So potentially if the developer fails to apply for a proper permit or doesn't implement a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or potentially there's an exceedance of permanent effluent limits. So those are all ways that you may be issued one. But then after construction or post-construction violations can also be issued for similar reasons. So failure to implement an appropriate stormwater control measure, failure to maintain or repair those stormwater control measures are also a very frequent reason we see, especially when, your operation and maintenance agreement outlines the expectations and then those aren't followed. That's a big deal. Anytime water is pooling or flooding on the property, that's another, red flag for many inspectors. So there are a few easy ways to identify that a system hasn't been maintained, but the inspections are in place to ensure that the system is properly maintained. Some other reasons could be illegal dumping, discharge and illicit connections. But let's move on. Now that we understand the responsibilities, let's talk about how we can avoid those notice of violations. Specifically, how can we mitigate flooding utilizing stormwater control measures, what preventative maintenance protocols should be applied, and what deficiencies can end up causing flooding. So we'll review a few common stormwater control measures you may find on any given property or parking lot, why they fail, and how to avoid that. Okay, so we're back to our diagram about the parking lot. When looking at the most common assets on a typical commercial or retail property, we have catch basins. A catch basin is a very common facet of any parking lot. They collect runoff and then distribute down to an underground system or a retention pond, eventually back into the waterway. They're often referred to as the first line of defense, as many have a grate to block large debris from continuing down that treatment drain. Another asset is permeable pavement. So this is concrete pavers or asphalt that's designed to infiltrate water to absorb runoff. Permeable pavement is an example of green stormwater infrastructure that is designed to treat water where it lands instead of conveying it elsewhere. Also, a retention pond. That's a stormwater control measure that collects and retains water that is filtered from somewhere else. In the diagram here, the pond is full of water. Sometimes they only temporarily hold water. But then also let's talk about underground systems. So these can vary. Some may just be a large vault as an alternative to a retention pond, but some also offer water quality benefits. So all of these systems work in harmony together to ensure proper mitigation of stormwater quantity and, of course, water quality. There are, of course, multiple other ones, but this is just what we have time for today. So let's talk about catch basins. You may also call them storm drains. They are a common stormwater asset designed to collect the runoff from non-permeable surfaces. So that's, again, just any surface water cannot flow through. Catch basins are a very effective stormwater solution. They come in multiple designs, including drop inlets. That's the second photo from the bottom left, or a curb inlet, which is the middle photo. Catch basin is the second photo from the right. These systems take the flow of water underground through pipes and eventually to a pond or water body. Naturally, sediment and debris settle in the bottom of the catch basin, which eventually can, of course, cause backups and flooding as the drainage capacity is reduced. So that's something to absolutely be aware of. Catch basins are usually found in parking lots and roadways. Normal wear and tear is expected because they are, in the activity of it all. Large trucks and vehicles are also usually driving over them, or maybe even parking on them, which can cause them to settle and sink, like you see in the second picture. In this picture specifically, you can also see cracks around the area, the two different squares around the drain. So that is a previous repair. So as you're kind of moving through, definitely something to be aware of. Those excessive loads will absolutely cause settling. But let's talk about some other common deficiencies. So like I said, settling, that's essentially the brick and mortar deterioration. So inside or around the mortar of the basin is, this concrete, sometimes it's bricks. Those will eventually fail, which of course will release some debris downstream, but also leave an opening for stormwater to bypass through the grate, which unfortunately will lead to sinkholes as well. Sediment buildup, as we talked about earlier, sediment collects in the bottom of the catch basin. So debris like leaves, trash, gravel, mulch, that will all collect in there and then eventually build up. That will lead to blockages and backups. Ground separation and cracking around the catch basin is a visual symptom that you can see from above ground, but it's always indicative of something larger happening underground as well. Moving on to flooding, there's really nothing worse than flooding caused by trash accumulation, because that is, the first step when dealing with catch basins. So thinking back to our illustration, if there's a blockage, crack, or issue with the underground pipe, that water could flood back up the catch basin, which we don't want. Heavy rainfall, so simple as overwhelming amount of rain, will cause pooling, but if water's not drawn down quickly enough, that's when you have an issue. Okay, so how do we prevent all of this? With regular maintenance, of course. Simple visual inspections are a good place to start. Just identifying pooling or ground separation when it's minimal can save you thousands of dollars in repair if a sinkhole opens up or your building floods. So during stormwater inspections and maintenance visits, the stormwater professional will be opening the grate to clear out debris, but also taking inventory of the structure to identify potential failures before they lead to those sinkholes. Professional stormwater inspection will also include sediment measurement. So understanding how much debris is built up. For example, once a sediment accumulates like more than a couple inches, depending on your property, may be time to clear that out. Same with trash and debris. So the whole point of the catch basin is to catch this before it flows downstream. So it's good that it's accumulating, but also you can't let it build up. So a professional preventative maintenance visit is also going to include documentation. That way there's paper trail of maintaining the asset, and your municipality can have proof that you've been taking care of your site, especially in cases where you may not have the budget to fix something immediately. Documenting the issue can show that you've been, putting in the work and you understand the priority of the repair. Okay, and corrective maintenance. In the event that something small becomes larger, now it's on that corrective or restorative level. The corrective maintenance is probably going to require some specialized equipment, but it's intended to stop whatever deterioration is happening. So an example of that specialized equipment is an industrial vacuumation truck. The truck it's essentially just a large vacuum. So it's vacuuming out all the debris and sludge inside underground assets, catch basin in this example. The debris is then stored in an internal tank and disposed of later. A lot of these trucks also have jetting capabilities, which is essentially a power washer. It's a high pressure water hose that will scrape the sides and make sure all the gunk is collected as well. Additionally, underground stormwater or underground CCTV pipe inspection, that's a small robotic camera that will send inside of a pipe to detect any further damages, clogs, and the ultimate root cause of whatever issue is happening above ground. So if you're having frequent flooding, you can diagnose the problem with something like CCTV instead of just putting a Band-Aid on the issue. Extensive trash removal, that's when the system has been neglected over time. On a large scale, you may have an extensive clean out that would be necessary to fully repair the structure. Rehabilitation or restorative repairs can also happen with full replacement eventually. So if we think about a stormwater system as if it's a car, right? So there's going to be regular maintenance. You need an oil change. Maybe you need a timing belt repair. There's just some general maintenance that's going to happen. You're going to need to get your system factored out every now and then, right? But that doesn't mean it's not going to work. The car is still going to keep running with that preventative maintenance. But then ultimately, your car reaches the end of its life. It's not going to last forever. It is the same for a stormwater system. But making sure that your maintenance is happening regularly can extend the life of the system, same way that it'll extend the life of your car. So maintenance and inspections help stay on top of the health of the system, but ultimately I want to be clear that water is an unforgiving force, right? So stormwater infrastructure has an expected life, but it may not last 100 years. Small repairs will help extend the life, but ultimately rehabilitations will absolutely happen. All right, moving on, we have permeable pavement. So this is a stormwater control measure that consists of pavers that reduce runoff with infiltration. The great thing about permeable pavers is you're not sacrificing space. It can still be used the same way as traditional pavement. There are many variations as well. You can include aggregate materials or the pavers themselves. So not only does this asset assist in water quantity, but also with water quality. So typical options include porous asphalt, pervious concrete, interlocking pavers, or even plastic grid pavers. We'll explore a case study later that includes some pavers and flooding. But these assets provide quality and quantity treatment. They're removing pollutants and also assisting with the amount of water. So with so many variations of permeable pavement, it's really important to follow the manufactured guidelines for preventative maintenance and corrective maintenance. Will likely as well be necessary to ensure the longevity of the system. But this asset is really beneficial in urban development and retrofits, especially is where we see it as well. So where surface area is lacking, it's really a great solution for existing parking lots when maintained properly, and it also assists in mitigating flooding. Okay, so in this picture here, we have permeable pavement in the spots where the parking spots are. So the centerpiece is just your normal asphalt, but I think this is a really great picture to show how it works. So in the areas where the parking spots are, it looks fairly dry, and that's because the water is immediately infiltrating, right? But in the center, it's starting to pool a little bit, and you can really see the difference of how that water behaves. Also, kind of in the middle of the picture, you can see some rocks along the curb. So the water is being funneled. If it's not caught within the pavement, it's funneled into what is likely, a swale back there. So this shows you that the pavement is working correctly, water is collected as it's landing. But of course, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the failures. So common deficiencies with permeable pavement. The aggregate material, which is, especially when there's pavers, there's some material in between those pavers. But it's called aggregate material, and that can sometimes clog when sediment settles into it. And then eventually it'll build up a crust that will lead to flooding, because then your permeable pavement is crusted and it's acting like normal impervious pavement. So that will lead to some flooding as well. Plow or vehicle damages are fairly common as well, especially when it comes to snow plows. Got to be careful with those. You're not scratching the surface. Anti-icing pre-treatments like salt and sand are also not really friends with permeable pavement because it will lead to that clogging again. Okay, so flooding, of course, sediment accumulation, that is always what we're talking about. It comes from sand, rocks, settling into the joints, or, this is kind of like a sponge in this material, so filling up the holes in that sponge. It's also when the pavers are clogged, like I said, they're no longer permeable, so they are behaving like normal asphalt. We talked about sanding a little bit. Permeable pavement is not designed to treat stormwater. It's designed to treat stormwater where it lands, not necessarily as an overflow from other assets. So that's absolutely something to be aware of as well. We've talked about the treatment train a couple times. The whole point is that these assets are working together. Permeable pavement is not going to solve your flooding problems by itself, right? I have heavy rainfall as well. I do have a picture here I wanted to share with you guys. This is actually from Bill Hunt at North Carolina State University. So this is an example of how they're testing the health of the system. So this is a drawdown measurement. So they've caulked in some 2x4s and pouring some water in the center just to measure how long it's taking to filter that water. This is a great way to kind of be on top of how the asset is really draining, or like I said, the drawdown time of it. So that's an example of preventative maintenance. Another example is the visual inspection. So if you think about like the picture on the back there, there's always some trees near pavement as well, and those trees are going to drop nuts and leaves and things like that. So once that starts to accumulate, it's also really good to be aware of that, because again, the same issue in a different font, right? So it's clogging those pavements as well as things break down. Okay, you can also vacuum or street sweep permeable pavement. And then some other preventative maintenance may include spot aggregate material replacement. So that's in the event that you have pavers and the gravel between the pavers is starting to, disappear. You'll want to occasionally repair that. As always, maintenance, documentation, and record keeping is an essential part of preventative maintenance as well. And then we talk about corrective maintenance. It's just the extreme version of preventative, right? So de-cleaning the system, maybe replacing that material in a large scale, and then also replacing individual pavers or sections of pavers as needed. Okay, let's talk about retention and detention ponds. This is another type of stormwater control measure, of course. So the ponds are designed to, retention ponds specifically are designed to hold water permanently, whereas detention ponds are usually only holding water for about 72 hours. So absolutely something to be aware of if this asset is on your property. But stormwater ponds are designed to store stormwater during high water events. which will increase the overall flood storage of your property as that rainwater is maintained long enough just to reduce the peak flow downstream just until the things calm down. So water is diverted to a wet detention pond by a network of underground pipes connecting stormwater drains to the pond. The pond's natural processes then work together to remove pollutants, so the system allows for large amounts of water to enter the pond, and then the outlet then empties controlled amounts of runoff downstream to wherever else in the watershed. Through our maintenance programs, AQUALIS monitors and provides inspections to alert property owners of any deficiencies related to ponds as well. Talking about deficiencies is my segue. So common deficiencies found in stormwater ponds, of course, are vegetation overgrowth. This is a very common sign of neglect. Excessive overgrowth hinders the pond from proper function. The mature root systems can impact the slope. Vegetation may also encourage negative species like mosquitoes that will make the area ultimately unsafe, especially as sight lines are impacted. That's definitely a common note we see with violations. Similarly, nuisance vegetation can take over, just kind of impacting the natural infiltration and pollutant removal processes of a pond. Sinkholes are actually common with the pond as well, especially related to underground piping that leads to the pond. So thinking about our parking lot diagram earlier, the catch basin had a pipe that goes into the pond. So those sometimes will fail as well. And of course, sinkholes are extremely dangerous, so definitely something to be aware of. Erosion, sometimes water will bypass the system or parking lot in the event of flooding. But when that water is displaced and moving over a slope rapidly, erosion can occur and of course compound as well. So flooding can occur due to sediment accumulation in addition to mitigating flooding. Another important function of stormwater ponds is to capture, trap sediment and debris, like we talked about earlier. When that sediment builds up, it's time to remove that as well. So definitely being aware of the pond is collecting things, but eventually we need to pay attention to the pond as well and make sure that it is operating to its full capacity. Trash accumulation, so sometimes ponds include trash racks to further decrease the accumulation downstream, but make sure you're collecting that trash at the inlet or near the outlet to decrease the amount of trash that will ultimately, of course, clog or reach local waterways. Definitely important to be aware of that to prevent local flooding. Similarly, debris or clogs in the outlet structure, trash, sediment, and debris are all contributing factors here with every asset. So failure to maintain structures when ponds are neglected, water level will rise past design levels, which then can result in notice of violation and flooding. Also, collapsed pipes. Underground structures feed into ponds. If they collapse, backups are going to occur. Likely in the pond, then all the way back up your treatment drain, like we talked about, whether it's the catch basin or potentially into the business as well. Heavy rainfall, this is when the drawdown is not occurring at the rate it's supposed to. Definitely important to, excuse me, I am off track there. There we go. Definitely important to be aware of. Moving on to preventative maintenance. Vegetation is a big one. Routine mowing, trimming, and removal of nuisance vegetation is very important here. Monitoring sediment at the forebay or basin, removing that trash and debris. Monitoring water levels, so after rainstorms for making sure there's proper drainage. Make sure you're assessing animal activity. So beavers really love to make homes in these ponds. They create dams, which will potentially cause flooding and backups. So being aware of that and making sure that it's not, beavers are not preventing the function of the original design. Okay, so corrective maintenance, it's again, the extreme versions of preventative maintenance. So excessive vegetation removal, slope stability to reduce or repair erosion, clogged or damaged pipes. So sometimes extensive repairs, major excavation is needed. or CCTV, underground inspections. So just making sure that we are using cost-efficient ways to find the root causes, but ultimately treating the issue at the source. It's not listed on here, but dredging as well. So kind of what we talked about earlier, sediment will accumulate, just being aware of how much sediment is accumulating. Okay, so next asset we will talk about is underground systems. So especially engineered underground systems, they're going to offer flood control, reduce erosion, and also improve water quality. So this solution can move water slowly to reintroduce it into the watershed. Large pipe systems help slow down and hold stormwater runoff, commonly paired with proprietary devices that treat water quality. So these underground assets assist in the removal of hydrocarbons, phosphorus, other heavy metals, especially when coupled with those filtration systems. So these are typically installed in parking lots, streets, or even open spaces. Proprietary devices are used in conjunction with underground stormwater control measures or vaults in the form of filters, cartridges. These remove pollutants through different types of processes. Underground systems maximize the space below the ground to minimize the impacts above ground. They're commonly found in colder climates where, a retention pond just doesn't make sense, potentially even could freeze. Okay, so some common deficiencies, what we can see, what happens when they fail. Of course, sinkholes are a big one. You can see in this picture here, water escapes the pipe and flows around the structure rather than through the pipe. This will lead to eroding cavities that eventually collapse and form sinkholes like this. Joint fractures where the pipe joins or connects is also under pressure. So, a failure there can easily cause damage that is typically only noticed once it's this bad, once it's as bad as the picture we have here. So definitely something to be aware of. You want to avoid that, of course. Overcompaction or weight can also cause fractures as well. So that will lead to erosion and, of course, surfacing sinkholes. Aging infrastructure and eroding corrugated metal pipes also fail, potentially leading to a shift above surface, causing depressions like this, and then opening up to sinkholes. Blown out slopes. This is more related to the velocity of water. So the faster it's moving, the more harmful it's going to be. The angle of those pipes is very important because that fast moving water can be dangerous, especially in extreme rain events. So moving on to flooding. When we're looking at flooding, this goes back to improper maintenance. Failure to complete the annual inspections, clogged drains, debris, trash, and sediment all settle and clog these systems and then back up to catch basins onto your property, potentially impact your business. Water bypass, when water detours from the design and floods your parking lot above ground. Damaged pipes, similar to the above waters not reaching or moving through the intended path. Again, will lead to backup and flooding. Sediment accumulation, trash and debris blockages all, again, lead to flooding. Preventative maintenance. So what we can do to mitigate this flooding and these sinkholes, continually measuring sediment inside the vault, just making sure that, that's not accumulating too much and the system is regularly cleaned out. Some visual inspections, but often if it's underground, you're not gonna be able to see in there. You've got to have some confined space entry. Making sure you're removing floatable trash and debris as well. Proprietary device inspection and cleaning often involves factor or, like I said, confined space entry. Okay, corrective maintenance. Same thing, guys. You're used to this at this point. Factor, jetting, CCTV, underground pipe inspections, standard non-invasive options for cleaning underground, proprietary filter, proprietary filter replacements. These can all vary in types and sizes and quantities. So working with the stormwater management team that understands the filters is really important. Repairs and rehabilitations. Repairs to underground systems are usually costly and extensive. So like I said before, with the car analogy, eventually these systems will fail, but it's really important to continually maintain them so that we can prevent that for as long as possible. Making sure this maintenance will help you be aware of the health of your system, especially that CCTV, so you can visually see what's going on in there, and making sure that you have the capacity to budget appropriately for future repairs and replacements. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this, but if this is what we call the run to fail method, or kind of the set it and forget it. This is a lot of what we see, unfortunately, with property facility managers. Maybe the asset's hidden, or they just genuinely don't know what they're supposed to do, and then they don't do anything. And then eventually something is failing, something's breaking, and now it's a severe issue. Maybe they got a violation. Now they're aware. But unfortunately, this lack of awareness of a stormwater system is the most common thing we're seeing. So that's why we're doing things like this. And I'm so happy Stormwater Awareness Week has allowed us to present as well, because the education is so important. So making sure that property managers, property owners, facility managers are all aware of what they have on their system so that they can, one, avoid those fines, but then also protect the environment as well. We often see that budgetary restrictions are a leading cause of failure, unfortunately. So we want to prevent that as much as possible, again, with awareness, but also, working with a professional like AQUALIS, we are here to help you plan and budget for future repairs. But ultimately, maintenance is the way to do that. Keeping up with your system, regularly inspecting it, making sure that you're on top of the health of whatever assets you have on the property is the best way to protect the environment and also avoid those fines. Okay, so quickly, let's get into some case studies. So this example is in Florida. These items were noted during an inspection of the facility. The property had multiple areas of permeable pavement that were clogged and damaged. So you can see here they were exposed and broken. The reinforced sod grid was visible through the parking areas. So in this case, the sod grid, is a type of permeable system used for parking as an alternative to asphalt or concrete. It also provides support and traction for the vehicles to park and people to walk on. But the damaged sod grid was preventing water from flowing through the stormwater system. So the system was severely clogged. It's not acting like a pervious system anymore. So to repair these issues, the damaged pervious pavement, it just had to be fully excavated and removed. You can see the site was in complete disarray, not functioning at all as it was originally intended. The sediment was severely accumulated and prohibiting any sort of infiltration. So the solution here, full excavation, remove the damaged portions of the grid and sediment and replace the grid, and then again with that aggregate material fill. So unfortunately, I don't have a final product with the fill, but the photos here on the bottom are mid-project, kind of gives you an idea of what's going on underneath the system. Okay, and then this one was a location in Texas experiencing frequent flooding. AQUALIS was engaged to assist the client in looking into the cause of this routine flooding. So the store reported the area always slow to drain after a rain event. AQUALIS came out and performed an investigation, found out that the nearby catch basins take on, of course, a ton of trash. During the rain events, the trash and debris continually clogged the drain. So in this specific instance, trash was flowing from properties actually upstream. So AQUALIS restored the original property to ensure the stormwater was treated and contained as needed. But then the issue was still coming in. We can try to mitigate as much as possible on site, and we did that. But it's also really important, again, to educate everyone in the community to make sure that we're all on the same page. So to mitigate excess sediment and trash, the team installed a silt fence to prevent large trash and debris from traveling across the property lines. But the root cause is larger than that, right? So it's important to be mindful of the consequences for your property and also neighbors. And again, we talked about this a little bit before, but when it comes to regulations, the whole point is to benefit the environment, right? It's not to just slap some money or a slap on the wrist. It's not about that. It's really about um, benefiting the community. So it's really important to spread education and inform others of how to be good stewards of the stormwater management, of how to be good stewards. Stormwater management is essential to prevent flooding. So in this instance, we were able to work with the property upstream as well, and ultimately mitigate the issue. Okay, so now about AQUALIS. If you aren't aware, we are a nationwide provider of stormwater and wastewater services. This includes preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance, retrofit, redesign, and emergency response. So we help protect stormwater control measures, mitigate notices of violation, diminish flood risks, support efforts in environmental stewardship. So we service single site and multi-site organizations across the country. As a leader in stormwater management, we're pleased to partner with and educate property owners in ways much like this. So making sure that people are aware of the importance of preventative maintenance and compliance with our programs. And we help building owners and facility managers avoid those costly fines, reduce liability, improve system performance, and increase overall property safety, as well as benefit the environment, right? We're an organization that prides ourselves in safety, compliance, and education. So if you're interested in a course like this, we're absolutely ecstatic to help you. Like I said at the beginning of this, I myself am not an engineer, but we have engineers on staff that I can connect you with. We have construction consultants that I can connect you with, so that we can, help you assist with that educational piece. Here is our certifications I won't go into, but that is my spiel today. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer to the best of my abilities. Gabrielle, I wasn't monitoring the chat. I don't know if there was anything coming through.
There was one towards the beginning. How exactly is sedimentation measured?
How is okay, that definitely depends. The quick answer for measuring sediment is a ruler. It doesn't have to be complicated. It depends on where you're trying to measure it. In a catch basin, it's kind of visually you can start to see when things are building up.
Awesome. And then we do have another one here from Angela. When a property's underground drainage system is enclosed and piping is led to seep underground, what can be mitigated when flash flooding occurs? Besides everything you mentioned, I feel like it is a little difficult if there's no discharge happening except underground.
Right, right. So sorry, will you say the first part of that question again?
Yes, when a property's underground drainage system is enclosed and piping is led to seep underground, what are some mitigation tools when flash flooding occurs?
Sure. So, my quick answer is there might be an issue with the capacity of the vault. Those vaults are designed to capture a large amount of runoff. So flash floods are a little different, but the vault should be able to capture most of that. So if it's not, then I think that there needs to be a little bit more investigation into why. But ultimately, there is some, capacity limit. We are getting a lot more rain than we ever were before. So if your system is continually, the water is continually bypassing a vault, it might be time to understand a little bit more about the entire system and how it's working. Like we talked about before, there's a whole treatment train. It's not just up to one asset to mitigate stormwater. So definitely understanding every piece of the puzzle is important.
Awesome, thank you. And then I have one more here from Nicole. How does permeable asphalt hold up in the snow and ice in northern states?
Sure. So we actually do see permeable pavement used often up north. It's just really important to be aware. And I've heard both ways of like you're not supposed to salt on it or use sand as de-icing. That's kind of the main concern. But it does hold up. often, if you think about, piling the snow up, if you pile the snow up onto the permeable pavement, it will melt ultimately and go down there. Of course, there's some capacity issues there, but we do see that asset used often up north. It's not limited to just, the southern states.
Awesome. Well, that is all the questions we have. Thank you, Carlie, for your awesome presentation. This has been really great. Thank you all for participating in Stormwater Awareness Week today. We do still have quite a few more workshops for the rest of the day. We're about halfway through now. So if you'd like to sign up for more workshops, they are available to be signed up for on stormwaterawarenessweek.org. This workshop was recorded, so if you missed any part of it, it will be available for viewing within at least 24 hours after this workshop. So yeah, thank you, Carlie.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and everyone's engagement today.